Next up is a presentation regarding school naming, the school naming committee's recommendation for new elementary schools at Coolidge and Jackson sites. Let's turn the meeting over to Eric Christensen to learn more about the process, the recommendation, and the unveiling.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Vice President Tominski and the board. It is with great excitement that we bring to you tonight 2 new school name recommendations. Joining me tonight is Greg O'Connell, who is currently the principal at Coolidge Elementary, Tammy Kuba, who's currently over at Truman Elementary as a principal, and finally Nick Duffy, the principal at Jackson Elementary. Really proud of this team and the efforts that they've demonstrated over the last months as we've gone down this road. It's really through a strong collaborative effort between these school communities, along with our community at large, that we present to you the 2 recommended school names for consideration this evening. We're going to tag team this presentation, and because Greg, Tammy, and Nick have all had important roles in this process. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Greg O'Connell, the principal over at Coolidge, who will share with all of us the goals and the naming process. Greg?
Thanks, Eric. All right, so one of the first things as we were taking a look at this process, and it certainly was something that took quite a bit of time, was to make sure that we were getting input from our students, first and foremost, and then our staff, and then our families, and then hence the community. One of the things we were trying to look at was to see if the name could then also be somewhat aligned to our architectural design that we had been working on with our designer at OPN. And then we also worked to develop a naming lesson to try to look at how could we ask students to submit some names that would stand the test of time. So we're looking for a name that's going to stick with our building for a number of years. And so we want to make sure that it has some sort of value, and that it also has something that we can look back on and go, okay, that was that point in time or that point in history. Process, we were discussing this in classrooms. Our plan was to do it in person, but in November, that was not an option. So we did travel to classrooms remotely and delivered the lesson, and then we're able to get feedback that way. So we went to those students that are in our buildings in person and to those that were in remote classrooms. Then we also created a Google form for those students and families to submit ideas. And then after getting those ideas, then we took that to our staffs. And then our staffs were taking a look at those ideas and then narrowing that down and adding to that list as well. And then we selected some names from there to provide as our recommendations to the board.
Thank you, Greg. And next, I'm going to turn it over to Tammy. Tammy, Nick, and Greg, very proud of them. They created this the naming lesson for the kids, and I'm so proud that the kids were really involved in this process since it's their school. And so we're going to have Tammy talk a little bit tonight about the naming lesson and the experiences that she had during that time. Tammy?
Good evening. Yes, so Greg, Nick, and I collaborated virtually and around a lesson. We worked through a shell, and then each one of us personalized the lesson for our individual schools. So Greg personalized the lesson for the Coolidge community, Nick personalized the lesson for the Jackson community, and I had to personalize it for both communities. So as we thought about children, we decided to use a children's book. So this book that you'll see on your screen, How Alma and How She Got Her Name, was a book that was selected. And we chose that as a springboard for deeper conversation around the importance of choosing a name for the schools. And so then that sparked a conversation with students. And within our presentation, we shared examples of buildings that are named after influential people, buildings that are named after landmarks, buildings that were named after innovative ideas or natural surroundings. And then Greg already mentioned, but then We shared a form with all of our families, our staff, and our students, and encouraged all of them to have an opportunity to submit their ideas for a name within that lesson. And so then that started that process. And so then we got a first initial pass of the lesson, or of the names. And once that list was generated, and it was quite lengthy, then we began prioritizing and then cutting down the list and then sending it out again for further feedback. So again, like, I can't stress, it was a super collaborative effort. I think we had lots of kids and families and staff participate in the process.
Awesome. Thank you, Tammy. And then finally, I'd like to introduce Mr. Nick Duffy, who's going to talk to us tonight a little bit about the parent and community input that was received during this entire process. So I'll turn it over to Nick.
Thank you, Eric, and good evening, board members. I want to reiterate as we begin here just how collaborative this process was. We did seek input from a number of stakeholders as we work toward reaching our final vote. As you see detailed on the slide, there were 532 total votes cast for the Coolidge site and 887 total votes cast for the Jackson site. The names that emerged really seemed to have a common theme, given that we had experienced a significant natural disaster this summer. In the wake of the derecho and the loss of a high percentage of our community's tree canopy, and given the topography and the park-like settings that surround our buildings, the themes were noted by OPN as they were designing the buildings, incorporating natural elements into the wayfinding and interior signage, as well as really utilizing biophilic design in the learning spaces at both buildings. The connection to the natural world and our resilience as a community was then highlighted by the names that were suggested by our students, our staff, and our community. And as has been shared, it was really a robust and inclusive process through which the names we present to you this evening emerge. So we're excited to share those names with you.
Thank you, Nick. And again, I can't stress enough the collaboration that existed between these three communities. It was fun to be a part of and hear some of the names that surfaced. So we are ready at this point to turn it back over to Principal O'Connell, who would like to share with you the recommended school name. Greg?
So for the new site at Coolidge, our new name will be the West Willow Elementary School. And if you go one more, Noreen, it'll showcase a few children that are currently at our Coolidge building that will be at our new West Willow building.
That is awesome. Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. And Mr. Duffy, how about Jackson Elementary?
Well, the former Jackson Elementary site will be known as Maple Grove Elementary. And you can see one of our future fifth graders there, who I have a particular fondness for because it's my kid. And then also a nice view of the exterior of the new building at the Jackson site, which will be Maple Grove Elementary.
Thank you, Nick. And before we open it up to questions, again, I want to thank Greg, Tammy, and Nick for leading their school communities through this process. I guess what I'm most proud of, again, is that student-centered approach where we really involved the kids and they learned a lot about the naming process. And through Greg and Tammy and Nick's leadership and the entire staff of those three schools, we're very excited to bring this information to you tonight. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Vice President Tomiski and the board for additional questions or comments.
Thank you so much for the presentation. So excited to hear the update. I'll turn it over to my fellow board members to see if they've got any questions. Their silence tells me that they absolutely love it and that you did a phenomenal job. I know I speak on behalf of the entire Board of Education. Love the process, love hearing how you put kids in the middle of this process. People often ask, how do you name these types of things? And what better way to do it than with the people that are going to be inside these buildings every day and know those communities. So hats off to you and the rest of the team for putting together the presentation and for sharing this with us tonight.
Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the school names and presented by the committee, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. All right, thank you very much.